What's up, everyone? Aaron Nagler here with Cheesehead TV and my very special guest. It's Andy Herman, and we're talking some Packers football. Andy, how the hell are you, man?
No musical introduction today. I was doing well, but until there was no song and dance to enter me on, I don't know how to feel about this.
Well, you see, you were not keeping up with the times, sir, because the last episode with Rob, I introduced a musical theme for Let's Talk Football. So that has just played. You didn't hear it because we're recording before the fact, but there will be a musical intro. So there's no need for me to sing and dance. And, you know, I'm trying to up the game here, man. I'm trying to add some production value, as Corey likes to talk about. So, you know, I just a little something.
You got to knock this off because, like, you up the production value and make things way better. And then, like, I'm still like 20 steps behind. So then I have to take things up. Like, if you guys, you and just everyone else in the Packers sphere could just knock it the hell off so that I don't have to up my game. And you guys all take it easy so I can just relax and not do things as well. That'd be great. So
you say all that, but then it's funny because I'm looking over this weekend at like YouTube, just YouTube stuff specifically. And it's like Corey and I have been around since 2007 as a website, right? We started a YouTube channel on a lark maybe like a decade ago. But now, you know, the last couple of years, we've started to take it seriously and started to produce actual content and do live stuff and blah, blah, blah. I do Packers Daily every single morning. Every single morning. I've been doing this 10 years. Packers Daily. About the same number of views as your Pack a Day podcast on YouTube that you started, maybe like a couple months ago. So, you know, you're doing just fine. You're rocketing to stardom. So you don't need me to pump you up, buddy. All right. Let's talk about the Packers. Let's talk about the green and gold here. And let's talk about the makeup of this team and the fact that we don't have a hard number for the cap yet. We do have a minimum floor that the cap is going to have to be at, which is at 180. Which is above what I think a lot of fans and media kind of had in their heads all season long. How much higher do you think it goes? Do you think there's a chance we get up to 190, or do you think 180 and maybe change?
Yeah, I think 183, 184, somewhere in that seems to be a reasonably fair number at this point. I mean, it's so ridiculously tough to tell where this is ultimately going to end up at because, I mean, it literally seems like every single day there's a different report from a reputable source of like, it could be this, it could be that, it could be that, and it's just like all over the place. So I think ultimately probably ends up somewhere kind of in the middle there, 183, 184. And I mean, it's all nice that, you know, the higher it goes, the better. But I mean, I think it to some extent, you know, those few extra million are great, but there's going to be a level of chaos with all the, you know, potential releases, not only with Green Bay, but a variety of other teams. There's going to be a ton of movement. I think the middle class in the NFL of players has already been kind of squeezed tight, and where you have these super high contracts for the best players, and then all the cheap rookie deals under, you know, so I think the middle class is going to get squeezed even tighter in this, you know, in this group of free agents, and we'll see where it goes. But I still think no matter what, even if it's 190, I still think there's going to be some level of chaos involved to it.
Well, the Packers obviously started making some moves, started cutting away cap fat, if you will. Friday night, evening, whatever you want to term it, we got the release that the Packers have released, Christian Kirksey and Rick Wagner. I think neither of those is a huge surprise.
Right.
But I was a bit, I guess, I did think there was a chance they would try to work something out with Rick Wagner. And I know Rob Domofsky reported there's a possibility he may retire or he's contemplating retirement. But I was pleasantly surprised by his level of play throughout 2020. Were either of those moves a surprise to you?
The two surprises to me was one, that Preston Smith was not immediately on that list, and that two, Rick Wagner was immediately on that list. And I guess neither is like insanely surprising. And I think maybe they're waiting with Preston to see where the cap ultimately ends up, or if they can renegotiate something. Who knows, right? Because you know, if they save $8 million in savings by releasing him, and you know, maybe you get him to cut $5 million off, well, $3 million for Preston is better than, you know, probably what you're going to get on the open market for some random guy off the street. So there's ways to kind of work those things out. Kirksey, I didn't think was surprising at all. But to your point, you know, the difference between the four players that everyone's been talking about all offseason are the two that got released, Wagner, Kirksey, and then Preston Smith and Dean Lowry. The thing that set Rick Wagner apart from the other three is he actually played well last season for a very large portion
for long
of
stretches. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then of course, you've got David Bakhtiari, who's injured and, may not be available to start the season. Billy Turner filled in at left tackle. Rick Wagner would then be your right tackle. You've got some flexibility there. And even the number that Rick Wagner had, I think in a normal situation, that type of money for a swing tackle, which we've all seen the value of depth along the offensive line, certainly was not exorbitant. So there's definitely an argument to be made that in a normal situation and circumstance, Rick Wagner probably gets kept. I just don't know, maybe with the retirement talk and maybe with how he played in that last game against Tampa, mixed with the cap situation, all of it together was just, we're going to move on. But I think that was probably the one of the four of those four names that I thought maybe would be most likely to have a chance to stick around.
Looking at guys who could have their contracts reworked or maybe even extended. Obviously, I think the headliner here is Davante Adams heading into the last year of his deal. I think that's a no-brainer. I think that gets done. Like, I'm not even going to be surprised when that news gets announced, right?
Agreed.
Do you think they restructure and or extend Zadarius Smith? Because we've heard a lot about Preston. We've heard a lot of people saying they're probably going to cut him. And I wouldn't be surprised. Wouldn't be surprised if they restructure him and keep him around. What do you think about Zadarius, though? Because that's a guy who has not been talked about a lot, at least in the public sphere, media-wise, etc. But I do think that's a guy that can give you some flexibility if you want to approach him.
Yeah, I think the two that are really interesting are Zadarius and Adrian Amos. I think both of those guys, have shown, some level of consistency. I know Z was down from what he was in, 2019 because he was superhuman
in 2019.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Superhuman in 2019. He was, just really good in 2020, which is still really good. So, I think you can, broach that topic. I also think he was just banged up a little bit last year. Yep. He seems to be a, consummate professional in the locker room, a guy that is, kind of a guy you can rally around on defense. Wouldn't surprise me at all if they tried to extend that out maybe a couple seasons and see what they can do there. It also wouldn't surprise me just based off of age and what they've paid him and where his contract is at. If they said, we're just going to keep things as is and we'll kind of evaluate it on a season by season basis. Same thing for Amos. I mean, he's been incredibly consistent, over the last two seasons.
And that's a guy I would argue with Amos who's trending upward.
I agree.
Whereas with Z, like you mentioned, you have this insane first year in the green and gold. But with Amos, he's really come into his own. He played fine in 2019, definitely a plus addition, if you will. But man, this year, he was one of the more valuable guys on the defensive side of the ball.
And teams really well with Darnell Savage. Those two seem to really, work together well towards the middle to end of the season. So I think that's another player that you could certainly contemplate. And, the question I asked Brian Gutekunst at the end of the season about being aggressive and potentially going into future caps. I mean, he used the word taking risks. If you're going to take risks, then that's the, potentially extending guys out like Amos and Z to get more money this year and potentially doing something with Rodgers' contract, giving Adams a big deal. Like those sort of things all make sense to open up cap space to continue to keep this current window open with Aaron Rodgers these next few seasons.
Well, keeping that window open, taking risks. We know where we're headed, people. We're creating cap space so they can sign JJ Watt.
There it is.
What do you think, Andy? Is there any hope? Is there any chance?
There's never a hope, only a fool's hope, Aaron.
Exactly.
No, I think there's I don't know, a chance in hell, I guess, that it could happen. I mean, I don't know.
Fair.
This happens every year, right? Fans and everyone alike gets, infatuated with a specific player. I found it interesting. I don't know if you looked at Doug Farrar's and Schofield's top 100, free agents of the, this season. They actually had Lindsley and Aaron Jones. I think they actually had Jones and then Lindsley and then Watt, like a couple, like 10 spots behind them. So just interesting if you look at a national level of like where you would prioritize these players, I think they do tremendous work. They had Jones and then Lindsley and then Watt behind them. So I just think it's interesting as to how you would kind of prioritize if you could only get one of those players back. Obviously, comp picks plays a part as well. You would get comp picks for Jones and Lindsley. You wouldn't have to give any up by signing Watt, all those things. But I think Silverstein probably hit it on the head when he said, I do think that Green Bay is going to have one home run swing at something, whether that's re-signing Lindsley, Aaron Jones, whether that's taking a shot at JJ Watt or some other player. I do think that they're going to find a way to create one home run swing this offseason. And maybe that's JJ Watt. It absolutely could be. But I think with the injuries, with his age, I mean, the worst thing that you would do is want to give him like a 2-year major guaranteed deal and then have him, have an injury issue and you lose one of those. And that's your one guy. That's your one home run swing. And so I tend to think maybe not, but nothing would shock me.
Well, it's interesting. you mentioned Aaron Jones, and I have been operating under the idea that this guy is gone. Like I've been pretty much there even before Rob put out that report that the Packers had made offers and he had turned them all down due to the lack of guarantees, etc. But I tell you what, that piece from Over the Cap today regarding not only we've talked a lot about the cap going down, but what no one that I can recall has really talked about much is how that is going to affect the number for franchise tags.
Yep.
And I've been asked a lot, do you think they would use the franchise tag on Aaron Jones? I've always said no. I still kind of think no, but I will tell you this. I mean, the Packers have literally not used it since like the last decade or so. But I tell you what, for a guy as valuable as he has been to the offense, and with that tag number sitting at just over 8 million, he's going to get probably 11, 12 million on the open market. That's a pretty damn valuable little tool that the Packers could utilize. Now, I don't think they will, but damn, that makes it a little bit more enticing. The idea that, okay, we can't come to an agreement here, but that's literally why the tag was invented, to give teams control over the players that they don't want to get away, but they can't come to an agreement. And look, I hate it for Aaron. I hate it for the player. I totally get that. I want this guy to get paid. But I tell you what, for team control at 8 million 1 year, that's got to be tempting for Gutekunst.
Yeah, I think, the best GMs are constantly looking for values, one way or the other. Where can they figure out an error in the system, a glitch in the system that they can take advantage of in some way, shape, or form?
We've heard Brian talk about that very thing a couple of times.
Absolutely. So, they're looking for those inconsistencies and ways that they can take advantage of it. Well, Aaron Jones at his level of play at 8 million for one season in the prime of his career and not having to, have a ton of wear and tear, who teams perfectly with AJ Dillon. That is one of those things.
That's what I'm saying. Like, wait a second.
Yeah. So I'm with you in the fact that I still think, so I'll say this. I think I was at about 75% gone, and I think maybe I'm closer to 50-50, maybe a little bit closer. Right. I still think he's got an arm and a leg out the door, and I still think there's a chance that Green Bay could yank him back in. But like you hit the nail perfectly on the head. I hate it for players, and I hate it for Aaron Jones in the situation, especially for running backs. I mean, running backs get frustrated enough, but hey, those are the things you have to take advantage of, and it's certainly something that Gutekunst has to take a look at, which of course he has.
So we're heading straight headlong. Can't wait to dive into draft season. Let me ask you this: I won't pin you down on needs or what have you, because it's always so silly to me that people kind of list off needs and stuff in the draft before we even get through not only free agency, but like even re-signings and we were just talking about the tag. So many guys are going to get tagged. So many guys are going to get re-signed. Now, obviously, this year is a little different because you do expect probably a few more guys to hit the market than would normally. But looking at the draft, do you have a draft crush? Do you have a guy who maybe in the process of starting to work on the draft, but even like just plain watching college football, that you've gone, God, I would love to see this guy in green and gold?
Yeah, so I'll be totally transparent. So, of course, in season, I'm doing all the grades and everything. And then the season ends, I'm doing season recap. And then like start of February is like when I start draft stuff. So like I've got like 3 weeks in, and I'm hesitant to go into anything when I've like when we get to like April, May, draft time, like I'm ready to go. I'm going to have these guys studied, but like I've started looking at I've got about 10 to 12 corners. I'm, cheap plug here. I'm going to be doing the Cheesehead TV draft guide for the cornerback group. So, I'm trying to
cheap about that plug, sir. Nothing cheap about it.
Absolutely.
That is high quality plug right there.
It is a high quality plug. So, I've got like 10 or 12 corners that I've, done all 22 work in, but like, I just feel, and I'm not calling anyone out, I'm not ripping on anyone, but I feel like anyone that's like at this point in the draft, except for those people who've been like covering the draft all season long, who are like, these are my guys, and like in like the 6th round, they've got to get this guy. Like, I'm like, where have you like? I spend a lot of time on this crap, and I don't like. I'm not even close to having a formed opinion on a lot of the draft guys, but I will give you a couple of the corners that have caught my eye. Asante Samuel Jr. Is definitely someone that's really caught my eye, as well as Greg Newsome, who is not related to Craig Newsome, at least that I have found, but Greg Newsome too from Northwestern. Those are 2 corners that have really caught my eye that easily could be potentially available there when Green Bay picks. Potentially maybe Newsome even this second round, although it seems like he's going up a little bit more. But those are two guys that have at least caught my eye so far. So I'll give you those two quick gems.
Talking about corner, and I love Asante Samuel Jr., man. Look, can we get one of these kids who makes me feel old because I watched his old man play? Can we get one of those on our team, please? Because like I'm sick of like watching other guys' offspring go to other teams and just like kick our butts and the NFL's butts in general. Be nice to get one of them.
They had a couple options too, right? J.C. Horn too, Joe Horn's kid.
Don Beebe's kid plays for the Vikings. That's just wrong.
Unacceptable.
That is just wrong. And then we got Winfield, who kicked our ass with the Vikings forever. Now his kid plays for the freaking Bucks, and they go win a Super Bowl. Like, I'm done. I'm over it. But speaking of corner, and speaking of what was probably perceived to be and may very well be a real hole there across from Jair Alexander, obviously we know what we got in Jair. We got a premier, if not the best corner in the league.
Yep.
But then you look at, because I have people asking me a lot on chats and inbox and Twitter, what have you. I don't know how to answer a lot of these defensive questions at the moment because we don't know really what Barry and company want to do on that side of the ball. Yes, we have reporting that they want to run the Fangio style defense, but we haven't heard from them what they want to do. I would love to know little things, just simple things. I don't want to break, any codes here, but do they want Jair to travel? Can Jair travel more under this regime that he did under Pettine? Because God knows that would be great if they could actually kick him inside a little bit more. But these are the things that, like, it's hard for me to sit here and say, well, this is what they've got to get. This is a type they have to get without knowing what they really want to run on that side of the ball.
Agreed. And I've said the same thing as, with throughout the Packers defense as I've been going through, some of these videos on Pack-A-Day of going through the defense. It's so tough to say like, well, this could be a potential target in free agency in the draft. I don't know what they're trying to accomplish. Are they going to be a cover 2, cover 3? Are they going to do a lot of man? Like it's very tough to identify, potential players that they'll be, really looking at when we don't know. And we're never going to know the full X's and O's, but, with Pettine, we had a pretty good idea of what type of players they were looking to target. But I know this. They had a crap ton of success with Jair Alexander and the type of corner he was. They did not have very good success with Kevin King and Josh Jackson and, maybe some of those type of corners. So I'm hoping they've maybe learned their lesson on what corners that, are good for them and can kind of look more in that Jair Alexander mold and maybe stay away from some of the height, weight, speed, but maybe having some deficiencies in technique, like a Kevin King or Josh Jackson.
A lack of fluidity to me.
Yes.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, we know Josh and Kevin both were tall, lengthy guys who, supposedly you wanted them to get their hands on the opposing wide receiver, especially the taller, bigger guys. But man, there's a deficiency in the hips. When you talk about turning and running and quick twitch guys who can turn them around, like that's where obviously Jair excels, and we've seen Casey Hayward excel there. I do think that, that's the kind of the way you got to go in today's NFL, because with the way people move around so much, it used to be you knew you were going to get those big guys out on the perimeter, so you wanted to match up with bigger corners. But you don't have to look past the NFC Championship game to see them kicking Evans to the slot to take on Sullivan and know, oh, wait a second, we got some problems here, Houston. So, to me, that's I'm with you. I hope they kind of, and I doubt they will, because they've had their type forever. They've had their type since Ron Wolf came on board. So, but man, it would be nice to have some more fluidity.
I agree. Speaking of which, what would you do with Chandon Sullivan unrestricted? Do you give him the right of first refusal? Do you, $2 million with a tight cap, or do you let him walk? Do you try to get him back at a cheaper deal? I think that's one of the really intriguing ones, especially knowing that they don't have much depth at the cornerback position.
That's.
I think they do at the $2 million, like the right of first refusal. And if someone else gives them a bigger deal, which I don't think they will, so be it. But it's a really interesting question. I don't know what they do there.
I think they give him the lowest tender, and they just, I can't imagine laying out a lot for him, but at the same time, it only takes one team to think they're clever and come sign him away, and then you are kind of swimming upstream at that position. But, who knows? They've got guys down the depth chart that we know nothing about, as far as their development. But that's what Ento's a perfect example. You know what I mean? Just as in regards to their development in their system, in their program, we have no idea. So if they feel comfortable about how these guys are trending, then they may just feel fine with like, okay, see you. But those are the types of things that I always talk about when draft and develop that, it's hard for fans to kind of not wrap their head around, but to get excited about guys that they just haven't seen. Like I think a perfect example of that on the offensive side of the ball is Yosh Nijman. That's a guy who every time you talk about tackle depth and they need tackle depth, well, some fan says, well, what about? And I'm like, well, we have not seen a snap. We'd have no idea. Like they apparently like him because they keep him around, but I can't tell you anything about him. So I do find that interesting when you're such an adherent to draft and develop. A big part of that is your development of guys, and we have no clue on the outside looking in.
No, absolutely. I mean, you just look at Bobby Tunyon a season ago, or even, they obviously felt much stronger about MVS and Alan Lazard going into last season than everyone on the outside. And they were right, for the most part. So, it's tough to tell sometimes how they feel about guys internally. And I think, just looking at the offense last year, there's a lot of great examples there.
There we go. All the latest on the green and gold with my buddy, Andy Herman, the Don of Pack-A-Day Podcast and various other Packers outlets. You can find his work all over the internet. The man is a legend. Andy, thank you so much for joining me, man.